All right. Well, good afternoon. Well, thank you for joining us. We're in another month with our assessment office hours. So it's always good to be able to connect with you all. We're glad you can join us today. We have our assessment team members standing by. So we have Jody, Cheryl, Nancy, Regina, and Varun. And we have our consultant, Andy Wallace, on the line, in addition to some representatives from NUIA, to ensure that we're able to answer all questions in a timely and efficient manner and give you those answers that you're looking for as soon as we can. Some general reminders before we get started today. Feel free to place questions in the chat. We'll hold them and save them to the end of the session, and we'll answer them in the Q&A session. And as always, we'll populate our Q&A document and have that posted as soon as we can to the website and notify you of its availability. When we are in the Q&A session, if you can either put your question in the chat and we'll get to it, or you can raise your hand if you want to ask it verbally, that would be great. And then that way we know that you want to ask a question. You move to the top right corner, I think, of my screen, so at least we know you have a question that you would like to share. We ask that you make sure that you're muted, just to remove any distractions and background noise. And then we just want to make sure that you're with us today, and we'll get going. So Cheryl, if you want to go to the next slide. Thank you. So I've shared who's on the call. Just a couple of reminders as well. We're currently in the process of updating student enrollment. That you have an extension until October 31st. I believe that went through the newsroom, that extension is available. We do ask that you populate it as soon as possible. We do have some data files that are coming due right at the beginning of November to send to our vendors in preparation of the 2022 spring administration. So we ask that you can populate those as soon as you can in Synergy. That would be helpful. And then recognizing that there are changes that are transpiring within districts in regard to the DAC role. We just ask that you make sure that those contact information and those individual names are updated within NEO. Login credentials are required to change that in NEO. And within the slide deck that was provided in advance of the meeting, there is a link where you can access the directions on how to do that. If you're unable to do so and you don't have credentials, please reach out to the help desk, and they're able to set you up with the necessary credentials to log into NEO. We'll go to the next slide, and I believe Nancy is taking over.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are in our second week of the fall NUIA window. It opened last Monday and goes through October 29th. A couple of new postings based on feedback and lots of questions from the field. We do have a NUIA state versus local accessibility quick guide. That was posted last spring, sorry, and we've updated it for September on how things differ between accessibility and accommodations and supports via what is allowed by the state versus when you give this as a local district assessment. In combination with that, we also put together a NUIA accessibility and Maine DOE accessibility crosswalk that was just updated that was just formulated last week and posted on the What's New and the NUIA web pages. And as a reminder, we have a new process for re-administration of sessions for NUIA. If a student fits the criteria for re-administration, whether they had rapid guessing or their RIT scores varied by too much, we are not asking that you get permission, as we did in the spring, from myself, from DOE, and emailing me. This is now being done through a Qualtrics survey, so permission is not granted, but we do need you to complete the Qualtrics survey for each re-administration of any session that you give, so we can collect those data points and review them after the window closes. Okay, Cheryl, next slide. It has been brought to our attention that we have been referring to the language required session incorrectly. We've been calling it language use and posting that there was a 2 to 5 and a 6+, similarly to the math and the reading. We stand corrected that the language session that is required is called language 2 to 12. It's growth : language 2 to 12. There are not separate ones for 2 to 5 and 6+, as we have in the reading and the mathematics. We apologize for this confusion. And that's that. For that, next slide.
So thank you to those that have reached out to highlight any discrepancies that you've found within the platform. The team's working to address and resolve those where necessary for those discrepancies that were shared. You should have received a resolution email from Varun directly indicating that those discrepancies have been addressed and changes in the reports have been made. So you should be able to see those changes where those have been resolved. Just a reminder as well, access is provided to the DAC within the SAU, and this information is pulled from NEO. So make sure any staff transitions are reflected in NEO. So making sure that, like I mentioned earlier, we are updating those records within NEO. That makes sure that any communications that we send directly to DACs are also communicated to as timely as possible, and that you have that information and there's no interruption to that flow of information to you. You can also add and delete users within the platform. So the DAC does have that functionality. I've given some supports and resources pages there where the roster and user management can be accessed. So if you have staff that have moved out of district, you can remove them. And if you have new staff that have entered into the district that now need access to Mars, in order to review data elements under their purview, that you're able to do so using your permissions that you have. We're anticipating that science data will be available early next week for the department to review, and then should be available for districts to review beginning 10/25. And for that review, it's primarily going to be a participation review, because the data is raw data. There's no subscores or anything like that. Benchmarking has not been completed because it was a field test. That will be completed at the conclusion of next year's administration. So it is raw data that you're seeing, but you should be able to verify the participants and the number of special considerations that you may have received for science, so that and the demographics obviously will be in there. So they're the types of review that you'll want to do in relation to the science data. ISRs are in the final stages of being prepared and should be available soon. We're hoping to tentatively push them this weekend. We're just waiting on some clarifying information, and once we have that, we're hoping they'll be available Monday. I'm not going to give you that date as a definite until we have them available for sure. So we will communicate once they're available. And once again, you will only see math and ELA data in those ISRs. There will be no science data due to both assessments being a field test. And of course, all NAWIA data that you currently have is also available in the MARC platform, so that is available. And then finally, we've added a training session. It's not yet on the department calendar, but it will be with a link. But we have some ad hoc training. So we've heard for a number of years from educators and SAU administrative staff that you'd like to be able to examine data through multiple filters. So you'd like to be able to filter data, say, based on socioeconomic status, and then filter that by then if the student was maybe a special ed receiver, or if they're an English learner, and by sub-filters. So that is now available within the ad hoc module. So the session that's scheduled for the 10th of November is going to be going through that module, how you navigate it, how you use the tool, so that you are knowledgeable about how you can use the data that's available to you within Mars for some sub-filtering and analysis. And there's also going to be functionality where you can upload your local data too, if you would like to look at that in relation to the state summative data that was there previously. And then, of course, because it is local data, the department will not be able to see that local data. We would only be able to see any state level data that we've imported. So if you did upload any local data to the system, that would only be for your purview only. The state will not have access to it. So we ask you to save the date, 11/10. It won't be a full day training. It's probably going to be a morning or something similar. And once we have that finalized, we'll communicate that out, and you can have the specifics related to that training date specifically.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm here to share information on national and international assessment for Dr. Regina Lewis, who's not with us today. In terms of PISA 2021, there are no updates to report for that assessment. We are in the final weeks with that window closing on October 29th. We do have several reminders regarding NAEP. A couple of these are questions we received in our last office hour. So the first question we wanted to touch on was, how will it work if the return to school plan restricts outside visitors to our school when we are in a high transmission area? And so we had taken that question back following the session. NAEP has people coming into the schools to administer the assessment. So this was a great question. Dr. Lewis wants to share that the NAEP field staff will work with each school to determine a best plan of action. So during the 4 months prior to the assessment, please complete and update the responses to the questions pertaining to the pandemic on the My NAEP platform. The field staff and Dr. Lewis will continue to work with schools from now until the end of that assessment window. So starting in December, schools will have direct contact with the NAEP assessment coordinator, who's going to assist with addressing these concerns. Please see the current NAEP 2022 COVID-19 protocols. And I'm going to pop this link into the chat right now. Another question we wanted to follow up with you on is there a plan for if our school is in a remote setting at the time? So depending on the scheduled assessment date and the amount of time left in the NAEP administration window, the NAEP assessment coordinator will work with the school coordinator to reschedule the assessment. And if that's not possible, the school obviously would not be penalized for that. We had another question about NAEP pertaining to US CDC recommendations about limiting non-essential visitors. And the interpretation has been that services and assessment are not part of that recommendation. So US Department of Education and the US CDC are continuing to work together to make sure that this federal guidance is in alignment, right? So additional guidance should be coming out about that, we expect, over the next few months. Some folks have been checking in about why the same schools are included in the sample again this year. So many of the schools that were in the sample last year, particularly those that participated in the STQ study, as well as the monthly school survey. So even though the NAEP 2021 student assessments were postponed due to the pandemic, those sampled schools still provided critical information through the NAEP 2021 monthly school survey and the NAEP school and teacher questionnaire study. So the NAEP 2022 school sample will represent the 2022 student population, while also maximizing overlap with the data from the NAEP 2021 school sample. So maximizing the overlapping school samples between 2022 and 2021 opens up a possibility of studying the student performance as measured by NAEP within unique context provided by the two NAEP studies that were administered in consecutive years, in 2021 school year, excuse me. And then we have one last note to please remind your school administrators and staff that we need to have select schools completing the provide school information on the My NAEP platform. So given the high interest in understanding how students are attending the school this year, National Center for Education Statistics, which is NCES, is going to report this fall on the data of students enrolled in person versus full-time remote based on grade 4 and grade 8 NAEP samples. So please do check in with your colleagues. Selected schools have completed that information. Results will be reported for the nation, regions, and states, broken out by school characteristics whenever possible. NCES is also exploring the possibility to report data and prepare for assessment as we learn more about specific instructional modalities of the students sampled for NAEP this year. And then moving on to access for ELLs. Cheryl. So as everyone knows, the schools have 30 days, that's by federal guidance, in which to screen and identify potential English learners. So those EL start dates should now be entered for all of your newly identified English learners in Synergy State Edition. If you have any questions about how to enter EL data, please don't hesitate to reach out to the help desk here at DOE or Perkins. They offered a great training last week to the field on that was specific to EL data, and we are here to answer your questions to make sure that we have that accurate enrollment data for our English learners. As a reminder, we are using that enrollment data so that Maine DOE can facilitate the materials ordering process for access this year. The intention of this change was for us to lift sort of considerable administrative task of coordinating all of the materials orders and give our EL service providers more valuable time back with their students. And the success of that is really contingent on making sure that our identified English learners do have accurate enrollment data. For students who require a paper-based material on the basis of the IEP or 504 plan, such as large print, is the best form that's entirely paper-based, the district will need to submit a materials request, which is available on our access page of the Maine DOE website. And so just a reminder that those requests will need to be submitted and they can be emailed directly to me. Next slide, please, Cheryl. Okay, so MSAA and MSAA Science, as you know, are our alternate assessments in the content areas of ELA literacy, mathematics, and science. As a reminder, we generate those NEO reports for participation in alternate assessments with the enrollment data from Synergy. So please do check in with your colleagues in the special education department, your special education directors, that all students who are eligible for alternate assessments on the basis of the most recent IEP do have that alternate assessment flag checked in Synergy. It does not carry over from year to year, so the flag needs to be rechecked for eligible students each year. And then one last slide. So at a glance, this is alternate assessments for 21-22. There is also an alternate assessment listserv that many folks may not be aware of, but you are welcome to subscribe to. So this is just a general overview for the year of when we'll be sending out action plan templates to the districts regarding their percentage of participation in alternate assessments, our assessment trainings for both coordinators and assessment administrators, the date of the alternate snapshot, which is when we will capture all of the students enrolled for alternate assessment, is going to be March 1st, and there can be no changes to assessment participation after that date. And then we have our assessment window, which is going to run from March 14th to April 29th. I have a quick poll that I'd like to share with you now. This is pertaining to the alternate assessments. Last year, we had created user accounts for all district assessment coordinators within the MSA platform. And I want to check in with you about the usability and whether or not that's been helpful in the past or would be helpful again this year, as well as some specific reporting information related to alternate assessments. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll right now. Oh, Cheryl, you're the host. Do you have the option to click on polls?
It's not allowing me.
Okay. Well, believe it or not, we did do a test run of this yesterday, and of course, then it worked great. So what we can do in the interest of just moving on is we can't, thank you, Heather. We can go ahead and get this out to you another way, probably a quick poll via email. But your feedback is very much appreciated because the district assessment coordinator is often, if not almost always, a person different from the person who is coordinating the alternate assessments. And so we really want to get feedback on how to make sure that information is streamlined, as well as your thoughts about the usefulness or potential usefulness of having assessment-specific reporting for the alternate assessments, as we do for NWEA. So we will send that out to you via email, and I'm thanking you in advance for your participation in that. The feedback will be helpful, and it will take you all of 1 minute.
I
And
wonder,
that's it for
Jody,
me.
if we can make you the, if Cheryl can transfer host privileges to you and make you the sole host. And that might
Yeah, I think that would work then. Let me do that right now.
give the permissions.
Okay, Jody, give it a try.
No, I'm not able to launch it. Okay, well, we will go with Plan B, and thank you everyone for your patience with that.
Hold on,
That's all
Jody.
for me, Cheryl.
I'm able to launch it. Give me 1 second. I can launch it right now as a co-host. Give me 1 second. Are you able to see? Because it says launched. No.
I can see it.
I cannot see it, ironically.
I
Thank
cannot.
you, Monique, for letting us know.
Yeah, I can see 4 or 5 responses coming through.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much for your patience and willingness to be adaptive. I can't see anything, so please let me know how it goes.
Okay, is the poll still running or should I continue?
I think you can continue, but the
Okay.
poll is still open and running, so I'm not ending it. So it's still open if folks, there's 60% have participated so far. So
Okay,
I'm going to leave it open.
okay. New and available resources. We have our assessment security handbook for 21-22, which is available on the DOE MECAS homepage. And we are in the process of recording short webisodes. Not webinars, not episodes, webisodes, outlining what is assessment security, what happens if there's an assessment breach or irregularity, and why this is important. We're doing these little new mini clips as opposed to a very lengthy, long, soup to nuts assessment webinar that's required. The MEA parent letters are available on the DOE website, which have been translated into the 10 most frequently used languages in Maine. And please take note that we have removed the dates for the administration for the testing windows, as schools have flexibility to administer the assessments whenever you're running those windows, and you can edit those letters at the district level as well. As I mentioned earlier, our two new documents for NUIA, the accessibility and Maine DOE accessibility crosswalk, and the NUIA re-administration policy for 21-22. We also have an assessment administration coordination checklist. This is for schools who have outplaced their students, either to private schools, special purpose private schools, or out-of-state enrollments. And I'm all set. I think we're moving on to questions and answers.
Yep, I'm just going to give another minute for folks if they would like to participate in the poll. We have 76% that have participated thus far. So I'll leave that open for another couple of minutes and then I'll close it. So first question is from Michelle. We've had some staff express concern about being a human reader due to how close they feel they have to stand to a student in order to read their laptops. There is also a concern about how students feel having an adult hover so near to them for the purpose of reading to them. One solution has been to project the child's screen onto a larger space in the classroom, but that option is not available for everyone. Are there any additional ideas? Do folks on the call have any additional ideas that they could share with Michelle about how they're addressing the concerns Michelle's raising regarding proximity? No.
Yeah, I would just add that the read aloud is tailored to be a one-on-one administration. So I realize that there are probably a lot of students who are getting this support, and you don't have separate rooms for everyone. Not knowing what your school COVID guidelines are, whether masks are required or not, or face shields. Those are just some things that are coming to my mind.
I would also say, like, when a student is having the read aloud or working with a one-on-one with a person, often there's a lengthy passage, so the student will, try their best to digest that passage. And so maybe you don't need to be hovering around them the whole time. Just give them a little bit of space and then limit the amount of like sustained social contact, lack of social distancing. But, that's definitely a very real challenge.
And we can keep asking around as well, Michelle, and see if anybody else has any other best practices that they're willing to share as well. And if so, we can forward them on to you for sure. Evelyn asks, will we be getting student reports for the fall 21 NUIA testing? So we will not be populating a full ISR for NUIA testing. You do have access to a plethora of reports within the MARC platform. So any administration that you do, so the full administration that you administer, you will have access to, and I believe it's within like 24 hours that those reports and that data is available within the MARC platform. So if you did want to provide any reports to your parents, it would be from the MARC platform for the fall. The ISRs that I referenced earlier are from the spring 2021 administration. So we're planning on them providing ISRs in the spring of 2022, which would have MSAA, NUIA data, and then we'll see where we are with the science data for that to be included. But again, we wouldn't have benchmarked and completed until the summer. So that might impact the timeline for the ISR, but that is still in flux at the moment. So the short answer is no, you will not be getting student reports from the DOE for full NUIA 21 testing, but they will be available in the MARC platform. Jennifer asks, NEO access is very limited. It's a staff roster only. Do I need to have that changed? or if I have access to Mars, is that everything I need is the DAC. So the only reason really that you would need access to NEO would be if you're the individual that is in that NEO platform, that module, or the variety of modules that are there. Generally, it's a school secretary or administrative assistant that has that NEO access and that's making those changes. So technically you don't need it for NEO. Usually someone can make those changes on your behalf if your role as DAC was to change. The Mars access is probably the access that you want for sure. And then as the DAC, like I mentioned, you can then add and delete users and provide applicable access to district and school level staff to access elements within that Mars platform. So you can create a district user, you can create school users, you can create roster users, and the link that was on the slide, which I'll try and retrieve regarding the user management guide, that would walk you through how you would do that. So I would go with the Mars access, Jennifer. Mary asked, do we know what time the ad hoc training will be? Generally, we try and do them in the morning, but we are also cognizant that you all have additional responsibilities. So I try and do things late afternoon, but recognize that that's often when staff meetings transpire. So I don't think there's any good time to ever do a meeting. It may be that we try and stagger it maybe over lunch. But again, I'm cognizant that that's your lunch break and the time is precious. So I don't have a concrete time as of right now, but as soon as I do, Mary, I will communicate that so you have as much advance notice as possible in order to make any plans that are necessary. Heather asks, was the EL training video recorded? Jody? Do you want to take that one?
Yes. Yes, Heather, it was recorded. It was co-hosted by the main DOE data team as well as April Perkins. The session was recorded. I will grab the link, and I see you already emailed me to ask for it. And so I will send that along to you shortly.
All right. Teresa, spring will have ISRs from Mars, and then fall will be ISRs from NOEA, right? So Mars, so I will be communicating with our reporting vendor Focal Point, hopefully by close of business on Friday, to push the ISRs to production. The team is in the process of reviewing them, making sure all the changes and the data looks accurate. So we've been in that process. They'll be pushed to production, and those ISRs, if you remember previously, the ISR would have the Empower data or MSAA data and then had the science data. So we've revised it, so it now has the NOEA data if the student is a NOEA participant, or it has the MSAA data if the student was an MSAA participant. The only page that you will not see is science data for either assessment because both were field tested. So that ISR that you'll be receiving, hopefully that will be in the system Monday, and I will confirm that for you all on Monday, would be the data from the spring 2021 assessment administration. The fall of 2021 NOEA administration will not have an ISR. Those NOEA reports will be available within MARC within 24 hours of the student taking that assessment. I think it's typically within 24 hours. And obviously the MSAA is not administered in the fall, so there would be no data associated with the MSAA. Then if we go with the calendar of the school year and go to the spring of 2022, we would be re-administering the NOEA in the spring of 2022. We would administer the MSAA in spring of 2022, and we would be administering our science assessments in spring of 2022. So then in the fall of 2022, we would have an ISR with both MSAA, NOEA, and science, because we would have done the benchmark and the MSAA and the main science assessment through New Meridian. So you should have a full ISR as of the fall of this year. So hopefully, if not, let me know. I'm scrolling. I was asked a question, what's the advantage of using the Mars reports over the report? So the Mars report, the ISR, basically one single report. So you're pulling one report for the student and all data is and we have the Moz platform has a capability, so you can download them in bulk, and then it sorts them. We have the student ID in the top left corner, so and the pages are evenly marked. So like every fourth page, it would be a different student or whatever that is. So that's how that's set up. As far as extracting reports from NWEA, I'm not too sure what that looks like. Andy, I don't know whether you want to share any more information about that and what that looks like and pros and cons. Because
Yeah,
you
I mean, yeah, I think the, oh, there's a little echo there, sorry. I like the NWA reports are really good, and I can't say enough about like calling the 855 number, maybe not right in the middle of the test, but once we get some test results in, they're so helpful helping me find just the right report. Some of them are well suited for parents, some are better for teachers, some will give you like a whole grade level or a district school-wide view of things. I think you're going to find them really, really helpful, and like Jeanette had mentioned, they're available almost immediately after testing. So I highly recommend looking in. There's a whole huge section on the left-hand column of the NWA map portal to find those.
Thank you. Anita, you asked the question, is the spring ISR including growth data? Do you mean like from where they were in the fall to the spring?
Yes.
That's something that's not yet been determined. So I think that's going to be part of the next phase of the conversation with their focal point and full transparency. Because we've never had an assessment that had that capability, right? And that might be where NWEA might be more useful because of that growth element. But that's something that we're going to be exploring kind of once we get through this assessment administration over the next 2 weeks.
Great, thanks. I appreciate that. I just made that assumption, don't know if others have as well, that because there's 2 test points, that would be included. Thanks.
Yep.
Yep.
And as a parent, I would find that helpful, right? Like to be able to see that in a document. So absolutely a great question, something that we'll make note of, and we'll start having that conversation for sure with our vendor to see how that could potentially look. Will was letting me know that my audio seemed to be fading in and out. Hopefully that's resolved itself.
has.
Thanks. Thanks for the confirmation, Will, too. Any other questions? Or any other concerns as you're in the middle of the administration of the NWEA window? I'll give you an opportunity to raise any concerns that we can address and do things better to make sure that we're providing you as much support as we can. All right, if there's nothing else, I'm going to ask Jody to stop the recording. We will make sure that the recording is